Cool. Well, we can jump in. I think just to kick things off, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got here, and what you're doing.
Okay, so I'm Hadleigh, and how did I get to speaking on a podcast with you about art? Started this cool brand called Blank Inspiration, maybe like a couple of years ago, and it's just been such a fun ride selling canvas and pre-framed canvases. Um, but yeah, the funnest part is just like being with artists, the clients, being able to travel to art shows, and then like I guess building all of the blocks of a modern 2024 online business, which could be for anything. There's so many steps you got to learn to run an ecom.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the idea for the pre-framed canvases came to be?
Yeah, so my sister used to have a framing shop like 20 years ago, kind of thing,
Hmm.
when I was just a young kid. My sister had a framing shop, and then dad was always very entrepreneurial, and he was like importing a whole lot of furniture from overseas when we were developing an apartment complex. And so I had, first of all, selling wardrobes, and then I was selling these paintings. We were selling these paintings, and they were so cool, like these big paintings that I was like selling the excess of the build. And then we were like, oh, it's kind of lame though selling imported paintings. It's not really doing like the artists of New Zealand the best service,
Hmm.
because you kind of want to support local artists. It's hard enough as it is
Yeah.
for the poor artists. So then we were getting them framed so nicely, these pieces. We were like, hang on a second, what if we just brought in a framed blank canvas and bring it in a box? And like nobody was doing it at the time. We couldn't believe it, like Googling up everywhere, and nobody was doing it. So we brought it in, like a few different prototypes, and then yeah, it just turned out really well. It does definitely helps artists save a bit of time and a bit of money.
Definitely. I think you have a great price point. I have one of yours next to me right now. And I think that is such a challenge for artists. I mean, I talk to artists all day long, and the biggest thing is to frame or not to frame. Is it worth the investment? The frame obviously makes the piece look so much nicer, but that's a whole other step. And then do people want to pay for it? And so I think what you're offering is so needed. And so I think, people listening, I'm sure that don't already follow you are going to be really excited to see everything that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's like just trying to create real value. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
How have you worked to connect with artists, grow the brand? Like, what are you doing kind of boots on the ground right now?
Boots on the ground. So the funnest part was probably back in New Zealand when I first got started, because I didn't know what to do. So it's like, Dad was like, "You got to go to the supermarkets and put it up in the notice boards," So it was like there, and I'd be like calling up schools, talking to the principal, getting the art director on, just like donating as many canvases, because we ordered so many in our
Mhm.
first order to get a good price. It
Right.
was just like bananas. We had so many framed canvases, so we were just like, yeah, donating to schools and artists and calling everybody pretty much.
Yeah. And how has it kind of grown from there? I know you're traveling some now and trying to get in different places. How's it going?
Oh, it's so fun. Nowadays, it's more on Instagram. We
Hmm.
um, we find Instagram is just like a miracle for selling art and being able to connect with people on there. So that's kind of like our central hub now. Um, but I still love to call people up and talk on the phone. I feel like that builds a bit of a connection from an online brand, which is maybe like a little bit robotic or something.
Hmm. I definitely think so. I think forming connections is so important, even if you are selling a lot, a lot of product.
Mm.
Especially with artists. I think artists really value that connection. And I think that's why I love talking to people like you on here because they realize it's a human, it's a person behind this big brand, that they're buying from. But
Yeah.
how are you using Instagram? I know it's a big platform for you. You have a good amount of following there. How are you working with artists to grow on that platform? What are some of the techniques you're using for growth and just for exposure?
So just started doing interviews on
Mhm.
Reels. So we would just like shoot it in portrait, and then I'll use my phone as the microphone, just on screen recording.
Yeah,
And we found that's really high quality. Like once you link the two together, the
that makes
microphone is definitely worth doing. Um, and yeah, just like interviewing, fun questions, like tips for artists, because our following is all artists. So we got to think like, what do the artists want to see? You know?
Right. Yeah, I think that's so important. I think being authentic and showing up and being yourself, but also really understanding your audience and not just showcasing how great the product is, but also like what do artists care about? What do they want to see? And I think you're doing a really good job of that. And I'm sure it's fun. I mean, it seems like you're having a
It
good
is
time
fun.
doing it.
Yeah. How about you guys? What are you guys doing for the Instagram? Is that like your main focus for
Yeah, I would
growth?
say Instagram and email. So I use Instagram a lot. I think something I'm trying to do more is show up myself. Like I used to very much showcase the art was front and center, which I think is important. It still is, but I think people do really like to see the person behind the company. And so
100%, especially in the stories.
yes. And so without feeling too much, like I think at first I was like, well, I'm not an influencer. I don't want to just get on and like talk about myself. So it feels
Yeah.
weird, especially being a little more introverted. But now I've realized like through doing the podcast and through using Instagram, people really want to know who's creating the work, who's selling the work. And
Yeah.
so something I'm working to do is, show up more myself when it comes to like the business coaching and getting in front of artists, but also showcasing the artists I work with and having them tell
Hmm.
their stories. And it's similar to what you're doing. I think you have to really understand your market and artists want to know. So like when you're talking to artists, they want to
Yeah.
connect with other artists, but also art buyers want to see the face behind the brand who's actually, creating this stuff. And so I think that's something I'm definitely trying to do. And it's free and it's not hard. That's the thing with Instagram. It's like if you put in a little bit of work, you can really see the benefits.
Yeah. 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 And it is fun too. Like,
Yeah.
um, it is fun just chatting away to everybody and engaging. You know.
Yeah, and I found like I used to be very buttoned up. Like I tried to really overthink everything and make it perfect and make it pretty. And I feel like I've become a lot more like loose and just had fun with it and not been overly stressed about what everything looks like. And I think things have
Nice.
done better. Like people appreciate just the authenticity, the
Yeah.
real posts and all of that so much more, which is great because it's easier to accomplish.
Yeah, and I feel like the more you get out there, you learn so much too, and like you're
Mhm.
improving. Sometimes like we don't do the best production, but I'm like stuff like we'll just put it on there, and then like we're learning as we go. So
Right. And it's like knowing what to invest in. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, like having a great microphone or taking really good photos, like those things pay off. But then the
yeah,
actual, like what you're creating, like you can be a little bit more in the moment. You can be a little bit less edited in stories. Like it's knowing kind of what's worth a little bit more time and investment and what's not. Sometimes not everything has to be totally curated.
yeah, and you kind of never know, and then like you post it, and they're like, oh, that one was a hit, or that one wasn't, but like yeah, you just and then it depends on what time of day you post. Honestly, I can't keep up with it all, but
That's kind of what I've come to terms with is it's like it's sort of a free for all. So I just try to post a lot and hope something
yeah, yeah.
hits. And if something doesn't, it doesn't really affect me as much anymore.
100%. And what do you guys got on for the year ahead? What are your goals?
Yeah. So trying to really expand reach. So I work with artists across the United States. And so just trying to build more connections with the art community is my kind of biggest goal. So obviously like selling art's important and education for artists is important, but I think actually like the community aspect is something I haven't really focused on as much. And I feel like I've
Yeah,
been so lucky through this and through the other things I'm doing to get to know so many artists. And now I want to really find a way to get those artists to know each other because I think there's so much we can learn from one another. And so I'm
yeah,
building
definitely.
currently a membership platform that's going to allow artists to actually interact a lot more because I think it's helpful to like get to know other people that are in the same boat that you can
Mhm.
talk about what shows are really beneficial or what products are really beneficial. And I'm trying to kind of really facilitate community this year and just finding any way to do that. Because I think some people have connected through this podcast already, just through hearing people talk. But I'm like, okay, how can
Yeah.
I do this on a larger scale?
I wonder if you could do a show. I think art shows are just like the best thing ever. You don't need galleries, and like it feels like you're at a gallery on steroids when you go in because there's so much art. There's like people around. Yeah, what'd you think about doing a show?
Yeah, definitely. I think too, I used to have this, I've had some people reach out about doing a show or, me doing a show before. And I think I had this notion in my head that it had to be really difficult, but through doing a couple of events and stuff recently, I've learned like it doesn't have to be that hard to put on. And I live
It's
in
kind of like what we're talking about with the phone.
exactly. It's like I think we make things more difficult than they need to be, but it's like you can kind of just throw something together and as long as you get people there, it's a good time. So I feel like that would be something really fun, maybe going into the fall or I don't know, finding just a cool venue and getting people there. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, which is like a great destination. People love to travel here, so I don't think it'd be that hard to get people to the beach to an art show.
Yeah, from like the states, you got so many people here. Within the states, you should be able to get a few people together.
Yeah.
We always New York art shows. Lucky enough to be gone to two now. They are just incredible, I reckon.
Yeah, I've traveled to a few in New York and I mean, they're amazing. It's kind of funny a lot of the times, like you'll walk into one of those high-rise buildings and you're like, what's it gonna look like? And then it
Yeah.
opens up a whole world when you walk inside.
Oh, just the art because I think so many people come from overseas to New York, so you get like a real mix of like
Yeah.
South America, Europe, and whatever. But even like the art show in New Zealand is incredible. Art in the Park in Auckland, shout
Yeah.
out, great show.
What would you say the art in New Zealand is like? Like, what is is there a main style you're seeing or subject matter? Does it vary like the different places you've been? Do you notice shifts in the art or is it kind of different everywhere? I mean, or is it kind of,
Well, I mean, as in New Zealand, like any country, you're gonna have some stuff that is like pays tribute to the culture.
Mhm.
Um, so you notice that like Kiwi culture, and then yeah, you get a real mix. You got the abstract stuff, you got like the floral stuff. It's honestly like it's pretty. Yeah, I don't know. It's like it's not nothing like locked to that country apart from the Kiwi stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, great display. Wow, maybe just there's less people, so you get less like variety. Or something. I don't know.
Maybe. Have you noticed traveling different places? Like, are there certain areas or countries that are more, I don't know, more art focused and they have more artists than others? Like, I feel like there's certain even like cities, like in New York, there's a lot of artists there. Have you noticed like differences as you've traveled?
Yeah, I reckon that at the art shows, there's maybe more buyers in different cities.
That makes
Like
sense.
maybe some of the small towns, the art is incredible. Like you go to a low key show, but there's probably not that many buyers there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say the buyers is the difference. I don't know who, I don't know actually that much about art sales, but there must be a real art to it because some of these gallery people were like, what actually goes on behind the scenes in the gallery? Nobody knows.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really interesting too what I've noticed city to city because I am online, so I ship a lot of art to different places and it's very distinct what goes to certain places. And you can tell like certain cities, like if it's more rural or more metropolitan, like the types of art that people buy. It is
Yeah.
interesting and it's often the artists kind of reflect that as well. Like artists from certain places are leaning into what it seems to be the style people are buying in those places, which makes sense. But it is kind of
Yeah.
interesting to watch from like, that's the one interesting thing with e-commerce and being an online business. I can see the analytics. Like I can pull back and see, okay, like, wow, 10 of this style went to, New
Yeah. Yeah.
York,
Yeah.
whereas 50 went to California. And it's kind of interesting to watch that.
Yeah, it's like sometimes I hear of an artist and they're like they'll make one type kind of painting and it's a hit. And then they're
Right.
getting commissions in that style and you're like, dude, if it's working, like go for it. So you got to pay
Yeah.
the bills.
I know. And I think it's so great the time period we're in with social media because it used to be to really make it as an artist, like you had to go the gallery route, you had to get represented. That was kind of how you sold your work. And I think now we're in such a place where artists can really start small, start on their own, and you can have something kind of go viral or have something that really takes off and you can just do it on your own. And then you can get picked up by galleries, which adds to it. But it's really opened the door, I think, for so many more people to become artists because there's less of a barrier to entry.
100%. I would recommend to anyone if they like bought a new house or they wanted to start a collection, go to like two or three shows and then just follow the people that you really like. And you're
Hmm.
like guaranteed to find art that you love.
Yeah, and I think what's fun too is my whole kind of goal with my business is connecting those kind of first time art buyers or people that aren't as experienced with first time art or emerging artists. So
Hmm.
it's people that we're bringing kind of the price points together. It's like I haven't collected a lot of art before. I'm learning. These artists haven't sold a ton of art, so the price points
Perfect.
align. And it's kind of connecting those people. I think is really fun.
Yeah, well, the price point, I mean, we try and sell our canvas and frame for as low as we can
Hmm.
so that you got your frame canvas because when we were selling imported artworks, we found that once you get to a certain price, the buyers just really fall off. You know, like most people don't go out and buy like $1,000 pair of sneakers. Like, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's like a big expense to spend $1,000. So if you can like bring it below that, it really makes a difference for like your average household.
Right.
I
And I
think.
think a lot of non-artists don't realize the expenses that artists have. And I think that's something great that you're
Oh,
doing. You are a
I
great
know.
price point. I mean, canvases are expensive, frames are extremely expensive, like if you want things done right. And so that's an issue I see a lot of artists run into is they'll get a commission or, someone will want to buy a painting from them. They're like, oh, well, can you frame it? And they're like, well, yeah, but it's going to be, you know, X amount
Yeah,
more. And I think what you're doing, having it packaged together saves so much money. And it's a great price point. I think it just is a no-brainer for artists.
yeah. The price point is super important for getting sales. And I also think that once somebody buys an artwork, then they're much more likely to buy another one in the future.
Yeah.
For
Well, I
buyers
think
to
you
make that
realize
first leap.
the value. Like I obviously love artwork and so I have a lot of art in my home, but it is interesting if you're not from the art world, it kind of takes that first purchase to realize, oh, this brings me so much joy. This really opened up the room. Like there's so much more to art than just a vanity purchase. Like it really
Oh,
can
100%.
uplift your space. And I think as someone who's I've lived in a lot of different places. Like I think what you surround yourself with, it doesn't even have to be
Yeah.
nice and it's super expensive, but you want it to feel like your home. And I think art really has the power to do that.
Yeah, like you're living with the art, right? I think that's when you
Hmm.
fully experience it as well, which is such a magic part of life.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's so important. And I think artists forget that. I've talked to some artists who I'll ask, what is your why? Like, why are you so excited to be an artist? And they're like, I don't know. I feel like people are just buying it because it matches their sofa or whatever. And I'm like, there's so much more to it than that. Like, you're going to have some people that just buy it because it's pretty, but you're going to have a lot of people that really, really love it and love what you're doing. And that's really powerful to be able to create something that sparks emotion in people.
100. Hey, do you guys ever work with like selling? If you're, say, you bought a piece of art and then you wanted to like resell it again in the future or like kind of trade it, like what happens with the secondary art market?
I don't really know. I haven't done as much of that, but I know people have reached out to me and asked, like, "Hey, can you sell this painting that was my grandmother's or something?" I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't know. I'm not in that business, but it is an interesting concept because I feel so lucky because as a gallery owner, I have the artwork like always like I have new artwork in my home and then
yeah.
I'll sell it or I'll paint something and then I'll sell it. So my walls are constantly shifting, which I love. But
I
it
love that
is
too.
interesting. Like if you wanted to sell it, I don't know. I'm sure there's markets for it but there needs to be a good platform for it.
Yeah, because like I feel like there's so much room in the art show space. Like we should have an art show
Yeah.
on like every weekend. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of times the secondary art market it leans towards like antiques and it'll go to like that type of
Right.
shop. But
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
if that's
yeah.
the right place for a lot of artwork. If the artwork's 2 years old, I don't think it needs to be in an antique show because then all of a sudden I think it loses some of the not loses the value, but it's just a little bit of a different market. And I think there
Yeah,
could be a market that still is fresh and it's
yeah.
recycling the
Still,
art and giving it a new home, but I don't know where that would be.
yeah. I mean, I just feel like anytime I'm at a show or a gallery, you just want more and more. Like the more art you pack into one building, seems to create this like effect.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a really interesting concept. Like my gears
Yeah,
are turning. I'm like, hmm.
yeah. Like because when you sell the art to somebody, you know, you say like it does hold its value. It's not like disposable or something. Like
Yeah.
it's always going to be. It should just like it should be in perfect condition always, which is cool.
It's really interesting. I've done some reading on art as an investment, like fine art, and there's
Hmm.
not as much. at least I found information on it as other things that are investments, but it is really an investment. And I think that's what's really cool too about getting artwork from artists that aren't quite as discovered yet, because that artwork actually has the potential to really increase in value. So it's like
Yeah,
you're discovering artists before they're popular, and then
yeah,
who
yeah,
knows what it'll be worth 5, 10 years from now.
yeah. It certainly won't go down in value, so that's always good.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
a safe bet. Well, with your business, what are some challenges you're facing? What are things that you've had to kind of work through growing the business, through marketing? What are some different things you've had to deal with?
So challenges. Well, it's just like everything. I feel like starting a business, like you got to make a mistake in like every single field to
Yeah.
to learn from those mistakes and grow. So yeah, we've had challenges in everything. You got to wear so many hats as a entrepreneur, but slowly getting there.
I think that's how, at least for me, that's how I've learned. I'm like, I think I've learned strictly through making every mistake.
100%, right? It's like, yeah, you just gotta eat mistakes for breakfast, pretty much.
Yeah, I was talking to someone recently and she said I thought this was an interesting take. She was like, my goal for this year is to get more no's and get kind of like fail more, because she's like, it means I'm putting myself out there, because she's at a little bit of a farther place in her business. And she's like, I've sort of
Uh-huh.
grown comfortable and I want to go to that kind of mentality I had when I was first starting. And I was like, I kind of love that. Like, I know it's sort of a backwards way of thinking, but she's like, I want to go back to that mentality of I need to make mistakes because it means I'm trying to grow versus being comfortable where
Yeah, no,
I
I
am.
believe in that. I
And I
believe
think
in
it's
that
really
for sure.
interesting. And so that's something I'm trying to implement since I've talked to her.
Because you're never going to get everything wrong. You know, you're getting a lot of stuff right and a lot of stuff wrong too. But
Right.
people love giving advice. I find like reaching out for advice is always a good call.
And I think people are more willing to work together than you'd expect to. Like, I feel like, I don't
Yeah,
know, I'm the type of person, if someone reaches out and wants to do, I don't know, some kind of collaboration or come on the podcast or anything like that, I think a lot of people are more willing to offer advice or to help than I think we think. And like the world is smaller than we think in a lot of ways, especially with social media.
yeah, yeah. It is. I find people love giving advice, and collab is such a cool word as well. I don't know if that helps, but let's do a collab. It just sounds
Yeah.
good. So let's do it.
Yeah. And I think it's like just putting yourself out there, I think is the hardest part, but then realizing you kind of only takes, again, like you're going to get a lot of no's, but it takes that one yes to give, at least for me, the confidence to keep going. And like there's been some people I've reached out to for this podcast, for example, and I'm like, oh, they're such a big artist, like they're not going to have time for this. And then I just shoot them an
Yeah.
email and they're like, yeah, sounds fun, of course. And you're like, okay, it's like we get in
Yes.
our own heads, but it's cool to
Yeah.
just throw it out there and see who says yes.
Oh, 100%. And then it's like all just comes down to circumstances too. Like,
Yeah.
um, yeah, people love chatting, and we're all real people at the end of the day.
Exactly. So I don't know. That's kind of what's I think been really fun about being an entrepreneur, is just the people you meet that I feel like I would not have this opportunity otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's cool what you're doing, like connecting artists. Um, and yeah, what about buying pieces yourself? Have you got your eyes on any artists? Who's your faves at the moment?
My problem is I love a lot of artists, and so I just have a running list, but I actually just moved, so I'm holding out a little bit because I'm in that phase of like I just moved houses and I'm trying to like get the house put together, but I have some big walls, so I'm
Oh, here's a
trying
good question. Okay, so if you're doing interior design, do you do the paintings first or the paintings last?
Ooh, I feel like everyone has an opinion on this. I'm so art centric that I know where I want the art to go, and then I kind of
Okay.
will. I feel like an art can fit in any room. Like I think people are really worried that like the art has to match or it needs to all go together, but I kind of think a great piece of artwork adds personality to a room even if it doesn't quite match. And so I'll start with the art, put my furniture around it, and then like if
Mhm.
it needs, a blue pillow to bring out the blue in the painting, I might throw that in there, but I kind of just let it happen. And I feel like it
Yeah, okay.
gives
Okay.
I think homes that have art that doesn't exactly match the furniture have more personality a lot of the times.
Wow, that's a good take on it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like picturing that in my head now. What you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like too, you can have like I'm thinking about my living room right now. It's like I have some artwork that just kind of goes and you're like, okay, that makes sense in this room. But then I have a couple of pieces that are fun. And you're like, okay, I don't know if like I can tell you picked that out and you love that piece. It doesn't exactly match everything else in here.
Yeah.
So you can do a mix too, where it's not like every single wall is filled with crazy art, but you have maybe your statement piece and then a couple pieces that are a little more that blend in a little
Yeah,
bit
adds a bit
more.
of character to it.
Yeah.
100%. Now, every time I see a painting, I can like see where it's gonna go. If I like it, I'm like
Yeah.
imagining where it's gonna sit.
Yeah. I feel like that's what I talk. So I talk to a lot of art buyers as well. And a lot of people, it's interesting because some people, there's usually, when it comes to couples, there's one person in the couple that like loves the art and is like, I just want to buy it no matter what. I love
Yeah,
the piece. And there's usually
yeah,
one person that's like, okay, but where's it going to go? And it's funny. It's not always like husband and wife or anything like that. But there's usually one that like needs to know where it's going to go. And there's one that's like, I just will find a place for it. And you kind of need that. I think you need a little bit of both, but I think
yeah,
if you really love a piece of artwork, you can find a place for it.
yeah. Unless it's like ginormous, but yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, what do
But
you find? What kind of sizing do you think is selling mainly these days? Do you think it's more big stuff or small or just combination?
yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I've seen recently smaller stuff selling more, but I think I'm also a little bit unique because I'm an online art gallery. So it's like being strictly online, I think people maybe lean a little bit smaller. But
Yeah,
I think when it comes to big art, it still sells too. And it's just kind of, I tell artists, I'm like, lean into what your thing is. If you like painting small, you can find the market for it right now. If you like painting big, you can find a market for it.
yeah.
But I do feel like on my site, I'm seeing a lot more stuff, small stuff sell. And it might just be circumstantial because it's an online gallery. But I've sold big stuff in the past, so I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. I've been wanting to do like buy a whole lot of small art and do a bit of like a composition on
Yeah.
the wall. That's kind of been taking my eye recently.
Well, and I think the beauty with smaller is it's going to cost less. So you have the flexibility to support more artists if you can't decide
Yeah,
on just one piece. And it takes up less space, so you can buy more. So I think a lot of the times, like paper pieces or, small framed pieces are so easy to move around. And so that's a really
yeah,
good entry for people that maybe aren't ready to invest a lot of money or don't know where the art's going to go. It's like if you buy a piece that's a little bit smaller, I mean, even up to 20 by 20, 24 by 24, that can fit in a
mm.
lot of places. It doesn't take a
Yeah,
huge.
and you can do lots of them. You can patch a whole wall
Mm-hmm.
up with them if you want to.
Yeah, which I love.
Especially if they have the same frame. Find that if they've
Exactly.
got a similar frame in a room. You don't want too many different colored frames in a room, right?
I agree. And I think that's something too. I've seen some really interesting gallery walls, like up staircases or just on a big wall. And that's the key. Like if you have to be so specific with your framing and you can have a little bit more diversity in the artwork, or you could even blend in like photographs with the artwork, but you just have to be really specific with the framing being
Yeah,
consistent so that it looks intentional versus like you just threw a bunch of stuff on the wall.
yeah. That keeps it aesthetic and
Yeah.
intentional and aesthetic for sure.
Yeah.
And then, like, do you think VR and like as tech evolves, is that gonna come into the gallery space? Do you think?
I've actually seen it. So I've seen some galleries, you can like virtually walk through the gallery, which I think is really interesting. And then there's a
Uh-huh.
lot of technology where you can get the artwork to scale and like hold your phone up and visualize the artwork on your wall, which I think is going to be really
Oh,
interesting for
yeah,
the,
that does look good.
yeah, for the online space. I think that'll be interesting when you're buying art and you don't know how it's going to look. I mean, I'm such an in-person person that I still like if someone's buying art online and they want to know what size, I'm like, get out masking
Yeah,
or painter's tape
yeah,
and see what it looks like
yeah.
on the wall. Like I'm still kind of old fashioned that way, but I do think so much is happening with technology. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the gallery space, but also with things like AI, chat GPT, all this stuff, like how it's going to help artists grow. I mean, I think, you know, 10, 20 years ago, we didn't know how much social media would influence the art market. So it'll be interesting to see how all of these tech
Mhm.
changes influence the art market as well.
Yeah, like obviously the NFT wave a few years ago was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But I always thought that it was cool how you could have like a certificate of authenticity for your piece, and then
Hmm.
like that just sits in your wallet in your phone. So you got
Yeah.
like your credit cards, and then you got all your art pieces in your wallet. I just thought
Yeah.
that was really neat feature.
I think that's really cool. And I think um, because I feel like a lot of artists send the certificate of authenticity, like the paper copy, and then where
Mhm.
does it go? You know, it's kind of like, what do I do with this? And so, again, I
Yeah,
think coming back to technology makes it really easy. And I think people are getting really innovative with it. And I think it's making life easier for the client as well, which is what's going to help sell more artwork.
yeah, and I've been to a couple of modern. Forget what they call it. It's like an art installation, and you like walk through it. It's something labs I went
Cool.
to in Japan, and yeah, you like walk through this full. Um, I feel like the artists like turning whole environments into art now with like projectors and
Yeah.
screens and digital art. Digital art is incredible, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I went to school, I studied artwork in college, and my one of my good friends, that was what she did. Like she did environmental. I mean, you really
Yeah, yeah,
walked into
yeah.
a full environment. And so she had her own room. I had little paintings on the wall that people could
Mhm.
just pick up and purchase, but she had like it wasn't like art you could buy. It's like you would walk into this room and have a full experience. There was videos, there was sculptures. It was like you were just in a totally different place, which is really interesting. And I'm definitely seeing more artists lean that direction. It's going to be interesting how that affects the buyer's market because I've talked to some artists about this. Like, how do you then turn that into something people can purchase? But
Mhm.
it might not be work for purchase. So it's just interesting. I'm excited to see how this all evolves.
Same, same. You can't predict it, right? But it certainly is interesting to watch.
Yeah, definitely. So it's cool. But what kind of art are you into right now? I mean, I'm sure you've seen a ton. Is there anything that's really catching your eye right now?
Um, hmm. What is catching my eye right now? Well, what I tend to do at the art show is like take a photo of a piece that I like, and then
Hmm.
I like be flicking back later, and yeah, it's like a real cool little booklet, like brochure you end up with in your phone of like
It
all these
really
pieces.
is. I feel like my whole phone is art. I feel like my
But
friends like,
probably,
have pictures of each other and stuff, and I'm like, I just have art.
yeah, yeah, and it looks great on your phone too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love flicking through it. But for me, if I was going to buy a next piece, it would be something really fun. I think like a funny one.
Yeah.
Something that brings a smile to your dial, so to speak.
I love that. Well, I love what you're doing. I think this is so interesting. I think people are going to love your brand. I think it's kind of crazy that this hasn't been thought of before because it's such a need. Like I think artists really need pre-framed canvases. And I think you can take the canvases off and put them back on pretty easily. Is that right?
Yeah, so at the moment you got a screw. It's about 6 or 7 screws, and we screwed them in already, so they're in the right place.
Yeah.
But I've been thinking, I wonder if you could do it somehow with like a clip, or I've seen some guy had like these rotating things that hold it in, just making it even a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But being able to put the frame on while you're halfway through your piece and kind of see how it's going to look at the end, I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so great. And I think so many artists, I mean, I've mentioned this, they want to frame their art, but it's an expense. And I think having it all already there for them in one package is so nice.
Uh-huh.
And again, it allows you to sell more artwork and raise your prices. I mean, I do think a frame adds that nice extra element that for a lot of people makes the piece feel complete. And so I think it's going to help a lot of artists grow their businesses a lot.
Thank you so much, and it helps send it to like I think frames really awesome for protecting your art. If something falls off or whatever, generally speaking, if it's in a frame, it should be okay.
Exactly. How have you worked to ship the pieces? Because I know shipping can be a little bit of a
Oh,
difficult
it is. Yeah,
endeavor.
it's like we all have one common enemy, which seems to be the couriers. But no,
Hmm.
the couriers do a great job, but sometimes stuff does get broken.
Yeah.
Our boxes, we're on like our fourth iteration of cardboard box now. It's like pretty much as bulletproof as you can get these things.
Yeah.
we've got the really strong boxes. These foam corners we use, we find they're great. Um, but yeah, always trying to improve the packaging because
Yeah.
even then, if you throw it in a van with like a whole lot of car parts or something will get broken.
Yeah. Well, I think what I love too is I always tell artists, like, if something comes packaged really well, keep the packaging because then they
Oh,
can
definitely.
reuse those foam corners and stuff to ship it out, which I'm like, I feel like I have a back closet in my house just full of like miscellaneous bubble wrap and foam and stuff for when I need to ship stuff.
Definitely. It's like you get an order, yes, sold a painting, and then it's on the other side of the country. You're like, oh no, how am I going to package this thing? And it can cost like hundreds of dollars if
I
you got to
know.
buy all the stuff brand new.
That's one of the biggest questions I get asked is how to ship more affordably. And it's like at the end of the day, it's going to cost what it's going to cost. But if you can do it yourself and save money and know it's at least safely packaged, you can save some money and also have the peace of mind that it's actually going to get there in one piece. Because that was talking about mistakes. One of the biggest mistakes I made was in the beginning just not knowing how to ship, and I would have stuff just few and far between. But when they arrive damaged, it hurts.
Oh, it hurts. And I mean, we're just sending canvases. You imagine if it's like, what you're dealing with, or an actual art piece.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, it can be heartbreaking if it goes wrong.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're doing, and I would love if you could just share how people can learn more about you, shop your free-frame canvases, and all of your information, because I think artists will definitely want to check you out.
Thanks. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
do you have any tips for the product? Because I know we've got to be a one-stop shop, so we try and like choose the best value kind of materials.
I
But all
love
right,
it.
what would you
Um,
say is your favorite wood for a frame?
mm, I don't know. I'm
Would you go
pretty
dark or light?
open. But for me, it's like as long as it looks really good in the frame and the frame is like well built and sturdy, I'm happy because I feel like I can work with different stuff and make the painting work for the frame personally,
Okay,
but
so as
that's
long
just
as it's
me.
got that good build quality that does the painting justice, right?
Exactly. Like that's the biggest thing is I know some artists will skimp on framing and will get cheap frames. And I'm almost like, don't frame your art. Like either I'm
Yeah,
not saying you
I
need to
agree.
spend a lot of money, but get good quality visually. Because it's like if you have a frame that's falling apart, it just doesn't do your artwork justice. So it's like you want quality in terms of the product.
Yeah, because that is like it's like a part of human thinking how you frame things. Obviously, I'm in the business, so I'm thinking about it all the time. But like, yeah, the way you frame a question or like the way you frame your art, it all makes a difference in psychology, in some weird way.
Definitely. Well, and I think it's like that finishing touch. And so I think you're telling the viewer the quality of your artwork when you're choosing the quality of the frame. And
Yeah,
so you want a frame that showcases the artwork the best way it can.
yeah, but you don't want to go too far. Like I've talked to somebody at an art show before. I was like, man, these frames are great. I was like, how much did it cost to get your frame? And he would be like, you know, it's like 30 or 40% of what he's selling the piece for. So I don't want
Right.
to name
And
numbers.
that's the
But you're
hardest
like,
part.
dude,
Yeah.
like,
And
where's all
that's
the
where it's
money
like,
going? You're not making any profit.
exactly. I have that conversation with artists all the time. I'm like, you have to know your margins from a business perspective. And like, if you're investing that much in the frame, you're really hoping the buyer likes that frame.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
Yeah. So I think what I love that y'all are doing, it's like they're simple. Like it's not like a crazy design that some people aren't gonna like, like there's definitely some crazy frames out there. But they're quality, they look great, and it is that perfect little like finishing touch that I think just elevates the art enough that it's great for an art show, for a gallery wall, for just selling on your own. So I think you've really achieved that in what you're doing so far.
Thank you so much. And yeah, like custom framing is always going to be the best for custom framing. You can do
Right.
amazing stuff with the frame. It's like an artwork in itself. But yeah, we just like that. Just your clean, just to do it justice as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think it's great. Well, what is your social media, your website? How can people buy from you?
Yeah, just blank inspiration, blank dot inspiration. Check us out on Instagram. Check out the website, and yeah, just follow along. You don't have to buy anything, but follow us on the gram.
I think you'll get some good customers from this podcast. I know this is going to fill a hole for a lot of artists I know personally. So I really appreciate you being here today. And this was great. This was a fun conversation.